Okay, so agenda in front of me, but I think the first item on the agenda is approve the minutes of the last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Molly. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed? Thanks. So that's done, and I think we have turn it over to Matt for your introduction of the main business tonight.
You bet. So, thank you. Good evening. Our first topic for you tonight during Education Committee meeting is the Iowa District Level Performance Profile. So similar to how the buildings have received performance profiles, Iowa has moved to a model now where a district receives a performance profile. So we've been in receipt of this information as a leadership team for a number of days, but it's been under embargo, so we weren't at that time able to share it with the community or with the board. It was only for the superintendent and the superintendent's leadership team. So we do have a presentation here for you. We've worked through that data. I think you'll see that we actually stack up very nicely in comparison to the other urban districts in the state. There's some continued frustrations with the performance profiles about being dropped levels for subgroups. That's especially frustrating for urban districts that have viable subgroups in every area, where there's multiple districts through the state where they don't have viable subgroups to even consider. So we've provided that feedback previously and continuously to the department and to the director, and we don't really see a shift in that. They continue to talk about improved results through accountability. And so that seems to be a common refrain that we hear. But Lucas is going to do the heavy lifting on this presentation, walk you through some of the data, and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. We did share this with the administrative team this afternoon too, because the embargo was lifted this morning. Of course, when I forwarded the email to you, so some of you may have already been in there and seen some of this and done some of your own comparisons, but hopefully we'll save you some multiple tabs and windows about trying to open that up and compare it. So, Lucas?
All right, before Lucas start, just really quick, just a note, keep in mind that I think a lot of the changes and improvements that we see on here is due to our superintendent of the year. And his amazing team, because we all know great leaders produce great teammates. So I just wanted to put that in a record since we don't meet again until January 13th. Go ahead, Lucas.
Thank you. We were crossing our fingers that this embargo was lifted this morning, so luckily we were able to present this to you tonight and not have to wait a few weeks until after the first of the year. So I'll try not to let Matt down as a member of his team here with this. Thanks for that high bar you just set there for this. So you'll see that as we go through this, a lot of this information is very similar to what we presented for the schools, because they did base the district profile much off of what the schools are also scored out of. So kind of just the format for this evening probably looks very similar to how we usually discuss the school profiles, just some basic background, the methodology that they chose. We'll then get into the heavy pieces, which is the results of our district, and then time for discussion and questions. So I would just encourage you, don't wait for questions until the end, please, just as they come up, don't hesitate to have those out in the open. So just wanted to give those of you that have been on the board for a number of years are very familiar with the profiles and the use of the profiles as well. So I just wanted to give a little history of how the profiles came into existence. And now, before the first of the year with the 26 calendar coming in, the now district profiles are a part of what we'll see moving forward as well. So again, this is the first year that this is a piece of what schools are presenting on, or what districts are presenting on. Matt kind of highlighted a couple of pieces as we'll get into the rationale, that accountability that they've seen success in with the schools, what they viewed as successful, or schools being part of the profiles. They would like to see the same thing for districts as well. So again, you'll see much of the same information be presented in similar meetings with our profiles with the schools. So just some basic background. Again, this was as the information was coming to us. So, it would have been great to say the embargo was lifted this morning, so we put this information together really quick. But this has been ready to go for a couple weeks here. But as far as the reason and the rationale of why the state gave for why the districts had their profiles come out, this was the rationale that they had given us. So It also probably explains why the school profiles were released earlier this year than typically anticipated. We didn't know that before that. But this kind of explains the typical timeline of when the school's profiles are released, which is right around this time. Explains why those were released in October and why our district profiles are now the first part of before the first of the year. So you'll see really how the districts are scored and how they are ranked are very similar. They use rating scales, they use the performance ratings that we'll get into here in a little bit. A lot of common pieces for our school profiles with our district profiles, well, which it's great because we don't have to communicate a different type of scoring, a different set of criteria for the districts that we do for the schools. So that is the nice part about this, is our district is ranked on the same things that our schools are. So you'll take a look, if you remember back, our elementary, our K through 8 buildings were scored on one set of criteria using 700 points, and then our high schools were ranked on a different set of criteria using the 900-point scale. Really, the differences in between the two are the graduation rates as well as the post-secondary readiness. Those are the three big pieces that are different for the high schools that are not on the K through 8 pieces. So how they rank the districts across the state, with the exception of only a couple that are only maybe a primary base, like so the districts share, one is primary, one is secondary. They use the elementary scale, but the majority of the districts across the state will use the 900-point scale because they have students K through 12 in their system. So again, this looks the exact same that we communicated in how our high schools are scored on their profiles. The set of criteria, the categories are the exact same as well. There's been a lot of discussion about some of the naming of these categories and how it doesn't speak to the great work that's going on in some of the schools. You know, exceptional, high performing, commendable, all sound great. Then you get into those other things, and the terminology doesn't explain the hard work that's going on in those schools. So you'll see the categories are the exact same, the index score range are the exact same, and you'll see that percentage breakdown of where the districts fall within each of those categories. I'll have that on a different slide as well here. So again, nothing has changed in regards to how the criteria for the categories are broken down. This is the same information that's on the previous slide in just a different format. You'll see that the majority of the districts throughout the state find themselves within the acceptable, commendable, and high. One of the things Matt had referenced, the same thing with our schools. If they have a subgroup that is targeted or dropped a category automatically, that is the same thing with the district. So you'll see that the majority of the districts are, again, within those three categories. We'll get into how those are broken down and how that data looks in one format, but because of a targeted subgroup, do get dropped down in category. So I'm assuming from my standpoint, from what the district or what the state communicated, where the districts fall is prior to being dropped a category, but that's my understanding of that. All right, so let's get into the results of our district. So the first data point that you see here, this table, it was something that we shared very similar to our, did we do a separate one in the APR? I think we did, right? But we shared the different components, and this was very similar to what you saw in our previous slide for the breakdown of how the 900 points are tabulated across the district. So what you want to see on this is Iowa City in comparison to the state average. And what I tried to indicate there with the light blue colors is those light blue colors show any category where we are exceeding and beyond the state average. So we want to see a lot of light blue on this graph, not much darker blue. So you'll see most of the categories how our score is tabulated, where we are above the state average. But you'll take a look at those areas, and we've kind of talked in our previous meetings when the profiles were released as far as those areas that we know that we have to grow on. You'll see that where Iowa City fell within those dark blue compared to that orange line, we are just right below the state average in those pieces. And again, us being the size that we are with the demographic of our students, this is a testament to the hard work that's being done within our district and in our schools by our staffs. But that doesn't speak to the fact that we don't understand that we've got work to do. So that's highlighting those areas that we'll be working to improve on with those dark. But again, the fact that we see this amount of light blue on this graph where we're above the state average really does speak to the hard work going on in our buildings. All right, so bear with me here on these two. So a lot of discussion about the targeted subgroups and what makes a targeted subgroup. So you'll see two different slides here looking at where our district performs compared to the state average in terms of this first one is based upon race. So you'll see where all of our subgroups are based on the state average. So you'll see what you want to see on that line is everything to the right. That means we exceed the state average, or in the next picture, where we're above with the gap score. So anything below the left-hand side there is obviously where our subgroups are compared to the state average. So where we're exceeding the state average is all of our students, and tabulated all together, our Asian students as well as our white students. But where we fall just below the state average is our Black, African American, our Hispanic students, and our multiracial students below that state average. The gap score is what they use to indicate the achievement gaps and what's indicative of how they reference the targeted subgroups. So where we're not targeted in any subgroup is any of our categories and race. So you'll see we outperform that gap score, again, which is indicative of how they determine targeted subgroups. We are above the average on that. Again, as I indicated, and probably not a surprise because districts that are targeted, the majority of them are targeted in special education. What you'll see on this next slide are different subgroups, EL students, our FRL, as well as our students with IEPs. So you'll see again the state average there on the left-hand side and where those subgroups perform compared to the state average, which probably not a surprise to some of you looking at English language students. Probably aren't going to be at that state average at that particular time, given the barriers that they have with English may not be their first language. And our students with disabilities is that probably a surprise to none of us, a student with a math goal is probably going to be very difficult to get them to the state average or proficient with that area. So again, the left-hand side indicates where we're at with the state average, and then the gap score on the right-hand side there. So you want to be on the, oops.
I was just wondering if you have an idea of how many districts also got dinged for the students with disabilities.
You know, that's a great question, Mitch, and I've got it in the slide in just a little bit.
Yippee.
That's a great preview. Guess let's
How is the gap cut calculated?
I knew you were going to ask that because I was like, Kurt, tell me an easy way to define gap cut score. They use, maybe some of you can help me out here.
Nope. Go.
Okay, here, hold on.
Well,
please.
and listen, we don't need to get into the weeds in it, but the state calculates the gap cut somehow.
Correct.
And if our kids are above the gap cut, that results in bars
right.
going to the
Yeah.
right.
And-
And that's what we want to
Yeah.
be for our targeted subgroups. It's not necessarily above the state average, but above the gap cut.
They look at achievement gap scores of where the, like, ELL to non-ELL students and how that factor scores. I was like, all right, I need some help defining this. So I put it in ChatGPT. I'm like, please help me define cut score. Like, these two slides, please give me some simple talking points with this. This may or may not be helpful, probably not, but the gap score is not a random number. It's calculated using statewide student performance data. Helpful, right?
Okay, but so the state somehow says, listen, ELL students will have a more difficult time showing proficiency, so we're going to give them about a 20%
Yeah.
bump
Yeah.
to recognize the barriers that they face.
They'll take a look at the overall student
Okay.
performance of the ELL students across the entire state where they use to determine that cut score, because you'll see that cut score doesn't change for race, doesn't change for subgroup. That's how they indicate the entire cut score
Oh, okay.
overall. So, but yeah, you'll want to see all those subgroups to the right. While it may not be to the state average, it is where that cut score was defined. And then you'll see our students with IEPs is just to the left of that line, so narrowly below that gap cut score of just negative 2.68. So, all right, so now what does this tell us? How does Iowa City compare to others? All right, so what I wanted to do was also provide an index score of just our special education students. So our district is ranked with the entirety of this performance profile with the index score here. And they also break it down by every race group as well as every subgroup. So you'll see just kind of how that's broken down here. I don't know if this is very helpful for all of you, especially when you don't have a comparison to non-special education students. But again, this just goes to show how that, the index score for our special education students is tabulated using all those categories that districts are scored on there on the left-hand side.
Wait, can you go back to the slide before? This is our special ed.
Yep.
So the gap cut must be that, some sort of, because 42.37 minus 39 point whatever would be the, so it's however they, so it's the total score.
Correct. Yeah. Yep, so it's gonna, if you see that bottom number here, you know, they've got different,
Yeah.
formulas that they use to determine based on student performance in all these areas. At 39.69
Is what's
It's
compared
that-
to the 42.
it's what's compared
But
to
we
that
don't know how they
42.37.
picked the 42.
Correct.
Okay.
Go back one more time, Lucas.
Yep. So that 42.39 minus the 39.69 gets us to that negative 2.68. I'll try to do a better job of like understanding what that means. Like
They walked us
I
through
tried
it.
really hard
Yeah.
to get that.
They walked it.
And I just,
I mean, but there's so much information, right, when they go through webinar, we could come back with a couple more questions to them about that, so we can give a better piece of information to you.
But this slide and the slide before are the only targeted subgroups in existence, correct?
Correct.
So we only have one of the targeted subgroups that is underperforming
yep.
per
and
the,
you'll-
per
yep,
the state.
Exactly. So you'll see, obviously, so here's, again, that's just looking at our special education students. When we take a look at any of the student groups that could be targeted, again, that takes into account all those groups from the previous two slides. Where you find the majority of the districts, where there's subgroups that is targeted, is with special education. So out of all the districts in the state, 37.7% of the students, or the districts were targeted with students with IEPs. That equates to 124 districts.
And do we know how many districts have enough students with disabilities to,
So you need an N score of 20
right?
to account for, to be,
Mhm.
have sufficient data to do that, but
Right. So not every district.
not
is
every
gonna-
district, correct?
Yeah.
But I think to Molly's point, like, did they tell you, like, there's 100 districts that don't have 20 students on IEPs?
They didn't give us that information.
Okay.
So what we wanted to do as well is, this has been beneficial in kind of comparing where Iowa City is to other districts around us. So we've taken a look at some of the other larger districts across the state. So what you're going to see here, as that note indicates there at the bottom, what you see here, because you're like, holy cow, this shows Iowa City in the commendable range. So you'll see that there on the left-hand side. I tried to put a line all the way across of where that threshold is for a score to be acceptable, to commendable, commendable to a high performing, and above. So this indicates anything before districts were dropped a category because of a targeted subgroup. So again, Iowa City's there in the orange, just below 600 points, but that's in the commendable range. But remember, because we have a targeted subgroup with students with special education, because of that, we go from commendable to acceptable. So really, the talking point is, we're commendable. Like, that's where we perform, that's how we perform according to the profile. But again, because we are targeting that subgroup, that drops us down a level there. So again, when we look in comparison to the other larger districts across the state of Iowa, we perform pretty well. I'll lead you to form your own conclusions about some of those other districts that are above us in the index score. So again, I think when we take a look at the size of Iowa City, number one, and the type of diversity that we celebrate here in Iowa City, this is really continues to be a celebration point for our district when we compare it to some of the other districts around us that maybe don't have the same size as Iowa City or the same type of demographics that we do.
Iowa City's 43% free and reduced lunch, and Lynn Mar's just over 20, so it's like,
Yeah.
I'll say it for you, Lucas.
I appreciate
Well,
that.
you can't.
Yeah, because you take a look at some of the, and
I can only imagine Milwaukee
I
is free
provide
and
the
reduced
same
price
prompt to our
lunches.
administrators, because they know the same
I
thing
know
when we
that.
talk
I
through
was gonna say.
different things that we compare ourselves to in the state. Those districts look a heck of a lot different than we do, and some of them are single high school districts as well, so.
Yeah.
So that again is all UEN districts. I'm going to let Matt take this next one because he's going to do a better job of explaining it than I did.
So, some of you are probably more familiar with the UEN than others. If you remember, we're always represented on the steering committee, and that's because we're one of the original members of the Urban Ed Network, and these are the other original members. So, I'm a voting member on the steering committee now. I think the most recent board member that was Director Clausen, and then that rotates. So I'll eventually rotate off, and then a board member from Iowa City will serve on that steering committee. Of course, the UEN does affinity groups for us, right, with superintendents, with other positions, the positional groups, HR, finance. But we also meet as just an Urban 8 superintendent network outside of our regular superintendent meetings, and some of that's starting to be a little bit driven by some of the school choice conversations and having to be competitive with each other. And just knowing that, some of our challenges, depending on your geography and your locale, you could be, sitting right there at the table in the UEN with some of your competitor districts. It's not always as much of an issue for us, but you think about a place like Des Moines with some other large districts that are around them in that conversation. Davenport, similarly with, Bettendorf, and Pleasant Valley's petition to try to get in, they've been denied. But either way, the reason I wanted you to see this slide is because I think it's a little bit more of an apples to apples about districts that, were originally large in the state of Iowa and then have continued to, again, diversify, experience the effects of increased poverty, throughout the state, and then how their system has held up and been able to perform throughout that. And so you see Iowa City really performs well, or better than really any of the other comparables there. Similar, I think every single one of these also had their special education group identified and were dropped a level, and so you can also assume that each of those levels for them, they would have been a level higher had that not happened. But Lucas did a nice job with the graph there showing kind of the total score, the state average, and then where we sit with those other large original founding members of the UEN. So when I think an interesting point for this is also just how do we advocate, right? And there's been a little bit of back and forth about the effects of poverty on this and the correlation to this. But Iowa has a really equal funding formula where we all receive an equal amount of funding for every student, which is better than some states. You guys have heard me say that before. You take an example like Illinois, where it's so locally driven that you see widely disparate experiences in school districts next to each other. So we're not dealing with that challenge, but we definitely don't have equity in our formula either to account for, an example like how we try to create some equity in our staffing model through the RAM, right? We don't see anything like that in the Iowa school funding formula. We were just given the same amount of dollars as all the rest of the districts in the state per student. So that's what that slide displays, and just a little bit of, again, background on UEN for frame of reference and how we might think about advocating with each other.
So again, where you see the difference between these two slides, the slide you're looking at now is after that category was dropped. The slide before shows before that category dropped because of the target subgroup. So that in itself is the profile. So questions and discussion.
Questions?
Has the state been transparent on how they reached the gap cut? Because, I mean, it seems to me like if they want to jimmy numbers around, right? Like they set the gap cut this year at 42, and then in 2 years they like drop it to 30, and then everyone like improves, and the state can be like, oh, look what we did. We helped everybody out. But all they did is they moved this number that no one's paying attention to.
Yeah, I mean, Chase and I have been looking over here, more Chase has, he's been trying to look up some of the technical guide we got with the school performance profiles about how that gap cut was established.
Doesn't do a great job.
It's not super helpful. I mean, I do think it'd be valuable for us to go back and ask that question again, because I know that was fuzzy to some of us about how it is, and then we just work with it, like you said. So if that number was changed, then, profiles would of course be very different,
They'd all
potentially.
improve,
I mean, you can
magically.
tell our special ed number on there. It wouldn't take an incredible amount of movement for that no longer to be a group that's identified for us. And so that's the best I could give you on it without trying to make too many value judgments before digging into it a little further.
And then I would really also be interested in Molly's original point of how many school districts have enough special ed students so that they would be considered for this. Because if there's 124 districts that needs improvement for their special ed students, and there's 318 total, but there's 150 that don't have any special ed students, right? They don't have 20 or more kids on IEPs. So that almost 85–90% of districts are targeted with special ed. That again doesn't strike me as like an Iowa, I mean, there's always room for improvement, but that's not an Iowa City problem. That's a way that the state is setting the gap cut to deal with special ed students if they're capturing everyone. If they're capturing and it's inauthentic, right? If you're saying everyone is not doing this correctly, that's not what this system is. It's supposed to say some people are doing a good job and you can bring your students up to what other districts are doing. But if everyone is doing a bad job, then that to me seems like a state problem, not necessarily a district problem.
Well, and I do think they've identified that, you know, we have an issue with our students on IEPs. I mean, I think that's an active part of the department's work, and I think we just have some questions about where they're going with that, and what they would like to see different, because of course we'd like to be a part of that. I made eye contact with a couple of people because I want to be careful how I say this so we don't give a incorrect impression, but I think another question that some of the larger districts have is about the conversation we're going to have a follow-up, our continuum of services in Iowa City. We serve a lot of students from a lot of other districts that are unable to serve the full continuum of learners for special ed, and they're all factored into our scores. And so it gets hard when we start thinking about ranking and sorting school districts and schools and how we take students for enrollment and the benefits or the potential reality of serving that full gamut of students. And if a student from a neighboring district comes to us and they're no longer a viable subgroup, but we're a viable subgroup because we say we have that full continuum and can provide that service, they're of course in our results. And so that's a pride point for us. We believe that we offer an incredibly high level of service in special education, but that's kind of an unintended consequence per se of it. And so I think that's another question we've been trying to ask is, okay, well, how does this work? One of your large districts are the ones providing service to your IEP students from smaller districts that can't provide that service, and now you're penalizing our subgroup because of that, where the other districts don't have that. So there's that, you know, I think that's where it just creates some, probably some hard feelings, right? And wondering about if it's really fair or accurate, and again, what the, you know, and I know what the stated purpose is, right? Improve performance through increased accountability.
Well, in responding to that issue as you've defined it, Matt, or described it, I would certainly be supportive of working with the state to have a rating system that recognizes that students really needing specialized services may not be going to the district they live in. And so the district that provides those services for them is doing an overall benefit to those kids. So I'd like the conversation not to be clear. We're not suggesting not providing education for the kids.
Right.
But we're interested in fixing the rating system so that we're not being penalized for doing that benefit.
And that's what we've tried to suggest.
And Melanie referenced here, I've tried to dig through kind of the state site where you can view by category, but then you have to go into each district itself to then define any targeted subgroup. So they don't do a great job of trying to figure out how to
Right.
organize that
And it's 20 students per what?
per subgroup.
I mean, per.
For the
grade,
entire
per
district.
age, For the whole
For the
district?
district, it would be 20 for that.
Okay.
In an individual school, when they get their profile, it's based on the school only.
Right, okay.
And that-
okay.
that again
So
is-
the district, it's 20.
When you look at the individual school, it's still 20, so.
Right, okay. So there's probably not that many districts that don't have 20?
I think special ed's probably going to be the one that we all have the most of.
Yeah.
Right, as far as a viable subgroup. There's going to be some of those other subgroups where you're going to see massive amounts of districts that don't have a identifiable
ELO,
subgroup.
probably, yeah.
Roughly 15% of the state is special. 15% of students in the state are IEPs, if I remember right.
That seems a little high.
Or was it 12? I'm trying to remember. No, we're 15 and
At Ashley, I don't know.
13.8%.
13. Yeah,
For the state? Okay.
so close.
Yeah, so we're
Uh,
close, yeah.
One, could you go back to the slide where it shows all of the bars, and it's a question on attendance and attendance growth. Doesn't really matter which one. So our attendance, chronic absenteeism is down to what, like 10% at 10.5? I can't remember what I saw earlier today. But my question is, with attendance growth, as we have students that are less chronically absent, how does that affect being able to have attendance growth? You know what I mean? Because if you have, and I'm thinking even at the building level, because one of the principals that I talked to brought that up to me because they were able to get a lot of points out of attendance growth, but now their chronic absenteeism is down. So like, what does that mean for next year? Trying to get growth if I don't have chronically absent students.
Because we probably saw the biggest increase that our buildings are going to see within that this year.
Yeah.
Like in future years, the growth will probably be very minimal because it's hard to improve when you've already set a pretty high threshold for yourself in your buildings.
So I don't, do you know anything on that, or just?
I do.
So I would
Let's
compare
give it
that
what
to
it
a
is.
high-performing building too, with high achievement rates. Like, how much growth are you gonna get credit for in those circumstances, right?
Mhm.
It's the same thing, so. Kate's jumping at the bit to
Well,
share some of this.
with the attendance growth, they look at the number of students that were chronically absent the previous year, and they focus your attendance growth on those particular individuals, and then the growth they make.
It's actually from 2 years ago,
For-
because then they
right.
took a look at
That,
last year's. Yeah.
So 50% of your score is based on those individuals, and the growth that those individuals make that were chronically absent. And then 50% is on your chronic absenteeism rate.
So Kate, if you have like 10 chronically absent kids and you get 5 of them, but then the next time they only look at 5, so you only have to get 2 of them to get
Yeah.
about the same. Okay.
Then run out of students
Yeah.
eventually.
Yeah.
Thank you for
So I
saying
wonder
that
if they're
simply.
doing that on achievement, then, to use my example. I mean, how would you flip that? So if you have a building that's got a 90% proficiency rate.
Oh, and the growth.
Yeah, and the growth, like, what are they doing there, right? Because.
I mean, the purpose of that is for you to focus your curriculum on to provide higher level curriculum for those students. So if you have 90% of your students in 4th grade, they're showing 4th grade achievement, the purpose is for you to start teaching them 5th grade curriculum or 6th
Yeah,
grade.
no, I understand the purpose, Director, like, I'm just saying it's harder.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because you're still having to hit the proficiency mark, you're still having to grow them, and so then to extend it for a group that's already met that, it's more difficult, right? And so
Yeah.
that makes sense, like the explanation here on
I
attendance.
can only speak to
The other one is,
attendance.
it's somewhat of a moving target on that end, but you guys want to tell them the other thing that's going to happen with attendance next year, since we're just kind of on that with, I mean, I've kind of provided you guys a little blurb about that some of this data is not going to look as positive for us next year. So maybe I want to touch on that
Want me
one.
to speak to it? Okay, so the state of Iowa is changing the way that chronic absenteeism is reported across all of the school districts. And in the previous years, the districts were able to either report exact minutes of absenteeism or half-day whole day. And as a district, for the last year or two, we've been reporting half whole day. Next year, we'll have to report exact minutes. So what that will look like for the district is that our chronic absenteeism will increase. But when we actually look at the data and kind of convert it all to exact minutes, we haven't actually increased our chronic absenteeism. It's going to look that way because we're changing the way we're reporting chronic absenteeism, if that makes any sense. So we'll have to probably circle back and kind of share that with you. But we were able to share that data with our administrators so they can look at absenteeism and exact minutes for previous years and then now. So there's, as we look at that conversion of data, it's still a decrease in the district and in our buildings. But it's going to appear differently in the data.
So we can already pull that by minutes? I was just thinking how complicated to figure out that.
Well, we have always done that, Molly.
Yeah.
I mean, when we look at how we.
How many, yeah.
Like
What
when we looked
time?
at who we send letters to
Yeah.
and who we develop attendance plans with, we've always looked at exact minutes.
Mhm.
Because we want to look at exact minutes when working with students and families.
Mhm.
And that, it makes more sense than half-day, whole day.
Right.
It's just when the state reported, when we reported that data to the state as a district, it was reported in half and whole days. It's just a change.
Yep.
So, could we, I'll kind of bring up another point here. The problem I've had in looking at this district profile approach as the state's using is that I'm having a really hard time getting our strategic plan emphasis on increasing proficiency for Black and Hispanic students especially into this analysis of district performance. So what am I missing here? Or what don't I understand? Is that,
Well, I think what you're still on to look through, is this the right one, Lucas? Let me see. I mean, we still have subgroup information, right? So we still have a focus on our subgroups in our strategic plan, right? There you go. And we still want to know how they're growing in comparison to our other groups. And so I think our strategic plan still speaks to the right work in that, in Director Easton.
Yeah,
because, I mean,
yeah.
we are still being held accountable to those different subgroups and their performance, whether it's proficiency or whether it's growth. I would say, you know, and again, kind of a comparison fashion here, we're doing a satisfactory job with those subgroups. There's still a lot more work to do, but the one that the state's identified, right, for us that's maybe more discrepant from, you know, our other peer districts would be our students with disabilities and needing to have some special focus there. And I think they have some special focus there, like I said, from the state level. Does that help at all? You wanted to see something more closely connected?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why there isn't a Iowa City strategic plan here.
So we have to be careful with that part too, Charlie, just because of the new legislation, right? So we can't even really talk about it like we're targeting Black kids right now. Does that make sense?
No.
But that's just where we are. So like that, like having like specific tasks to just go after Black students who are discrepant, right? We can't look at the work like that anymore.
Well, there are Hispanic students that are.
Same.
I've done
Like
same.
we can't pull any subcategory and just go after like a race. Does that make sense? We can't look at it like that. So we have to, our approach just has to be a little different. But we still are looking for our students who are most in need, right? And trying to figure out what to do for them. But this idea of having a plan specifically for Black and Latino students, we have to be careful with that.
But we can get dinged down for Black and Latino students,
Right.
but we can't focus.
You can't employ programs just
Yeah.
to support those subgroups.
Yeah, sure, that makes sense.
And I think it lies in previous presentations has talked about the rollout of some of our new curriculum that has seen students of our subgroups outperform what they would tend to see as an average. with their
Yeah,
peers.
so we have had a kind of a slower rollout of our math materials for the last couple of years, just as a result of some of the budget difficulties that we experienced last few years. However, not saying that being in a budget situation was helpful. However, we have been able to track our data a little bit more closely, and we have seen our students of color grow at like statistically like uncommon rates, like really a lot higher than the publishers at the company that we engaged with the pilot. We're anticipating for our students of color and how they're performing in math because of the structure and the way that we are teaching math, which is a lot more of less sit and get direct instruction and more collaborative exploration. The kids are engaging in cognitive discourse and having a lot of discussion around math, and they're actually building a lot deeper conceptual understanding around mathematical practices that they're able to apply over time. And so we are seeing our kids that are in some of our most vulnerable demographic areas outperform what we had anticipated because of the ways that we are employing instructional strategies. And so we're excited about that, which then we are now going to engage in some professional development this summer around high quality vocabulary instruction, which we think will really help target some of those subgroups as well, about explicitly teaching high leverage and the tiered vocabulary instruction to make sure, I mean, if a kid doesn't understand the vocabulary on a text, they're not going to do well on it. And so making sure that we have a systematic approach to teaching high leverage vocabulary. So those are a lot of things that we're doing that we think will specifically target subgroups, but we also know is just good teaching overall.
So we have a lot of kids that can learn math as well as all the other kids.
Absolutely.
And we're devising ways to teach them.
Yeah, we think that we are finding strategies that are allowing our students that may not learn in the most traditional sit and get way, that we're able to unlock what they know, because we know that they know a lot of really good things, to be able to, we call it, kind of sounds funny, inviting them to the math community, to display what they know about math that might not be the traditional standard algorithm. Sometimes that's not everybody's favorite that loves a good standard algorithm, so that's been a shift for some people in our community, a lot of parents that like a standard algorithm like long division. That is a strategy to learn division. However, that's not the only one that we're going to teach kids, in hopes that we provide them exposure to a lot of different ways to get to the same end product.
So can we publicize that without having an anti-DEI person coming down and yelling at me?
Showing the improvement in
Well, showing
scores?
showing that we are responding to an educational situation that needs to be different than we were used in the past.
Charlie, I think we definitely can and we will. I think the problem is right now it's just early, right? Like we have a couple data sets back. What we'd like to see is some trend data to show that, and when we have confidence in success, or in our success, that that's going to be sustained and replicated, I'd feel a lot better about sharing that out as, hey, you know, we really feel like we've unlocked something here and that we're moving in the right direction. So we're very optimistic. Our teachers are still early in their implementation and adoption of those, and there's a lot of learning and growing. I mean, these are big lifts for our math teachers in their classrooms. It's reworking the whole way they've approached instruction before, and really proud of how they've responded to that. But I just think we need a little bit more time before we start touting that one.
Well, I can understand desiring strong data, but I'm also interested in communicating to the community, especially the parents of those kids, that their kids are great. We are working on ways to make their greatness known.
And I think that we can feel a lot better about doing at the classroom and building level than I would about like district celebration in that regard. And so I think we definitely want those instructors sharing that with their students and with their parents. Same thing with the school buildings where they're finding success. I just think as a district, before we make some public proclamations on it, we want to keep watching the data.
Were there any UEN schools that hit commendable?
Yes, but not the original 8. So if Lucas goes back to that slide, you'll have some UENs, some of the Golden Circle districts around Des Moines.
Why do you call them the Golden Circle again?
Huh?
Why are they called the Golden Circle again?
I'll let you decide why.
But just two.
You have some of those, and then what's the
Cedar
other
Falls
one?
made it.
Maybe Ames and Cedar Falls.
So this is before
That's
they
how
were
you
dropped
can-
down the
Yeah.
category.
No, no,
though,
no,
So this
no.
one's hard, because
Yeah,
not
I don't know
everybody
if
was
Ames
dropped
and
down a
Cedar
category.
Falls got dropped.
Well, that's what I was wondering, is if any
Well, even
UEN
if Cedar
schools got
Falls got
dropped down
dropped,
a category.
Several got dropped category. My question would just be, I think primarily Ames and Cedar Falls if they got dropped. I don't think,
Matt, that's not Ames, that's
Ankeny.
Ankeny.
sorry.
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah, sorry.
Ankeny. I mean,
But that would
the other
be
thing
it,
is the
is-
link you
is
guys
just
have.
those two.
You know, the link that you guys have, you can go in there and you can
And look.
click on any district and you'll see if they had a group that was identified and if so.
Ankeny was high performing, is high performing, and did not get dropped.
They didn't.
Okay, we have about 50 minutes left. To go over anything that we've missed so far.
I think tonight we just really wanted your awareness on it. I'm not going to do a district communication this week in this, about this. And so we wanted to make sure you guys were aware if we think there's something necessary potentially following the break, we'd consider that. But I'm trying to make sure you had a chance to see the information and understand it. So.
So, anything directors want to let the superintendent know? Okay, Matt, you got it. So,
All right, great.
until the next
I
time.
guess you need to, is it just adjournment?
Yeah,
Well,
just
there's
adjournment.
agenda settings on the agenda too. I think.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Oh, we're gonna do that?
Let's see.
We had
tab open.
We had the Office of
For
Professional.
the third time, you've
Okay.
been
Oh,
trying this
yeah.
We
one.
bumped.
So if we do this, we really have to make sure Anna gets her opportunity. Because she's
We've
been
moved her 3 times.
super flexible because we bounced her around quite a bit. So that would be the idea for January.
Okay.
This would be the Office of PD. So we formerly called that teacher leadership, and now it's morphed into the Office of PD. So we'd like to highlight some of their work.
Okay, sounds good.
And we'll also select a chair at that meeting.
Sure.
Yeah, we can add that to the agenda,
Yeah.
so we can do that.
And I don't need a birthday present, so.
Happy birthday,
Happy
Tom.
birthday,
Happy
Charlie.
birthday.
I heard you might not like all the accolades.
I
So
don't know.
Or save the singing?
What's that?
Yes to singing or no singing?
No, that's not.
He said loudly, loud singing.
Okay. If there's nothing else, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And nay.